Hi, everyone. You guys know who I am. I'm working from home today, and I just wanted to quickly introduce. So we've got here Elizabeth and Zia. They are from the law firm of Long Mango G. They're immigration lawyers. Their practice is in Toronto, and they have decades of experience. They're very lovely, nice ladies, and they're going to give us some great information to kind of, plan our lives going forward. If you guys have any questions, they'll be answered at the end, and you can also always email me after the webinar to ask me any questions as well. Okay.
Sure. Thank you so much, Elisa. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys today. Okay, so this presentation is about immigration, and what we're going to do today is we're going to help you navigate what you should do right now as your students, how you might be able to qualify for different kinds of work permits, and how you might be able to get on the path towards permanent residence. So let's first talk about some things that you need to know just for temporary residence. All of you, if you're here as international students, will have study permits that have end date on your study permit, right? So what does that mean? How do you, what do you need to do while you are students?
Yeah, so the first thing that you want to keep in mind is that while you're here in Canada, it's really important to ensure that you have status throughout your time in Canada. And one part of that is making sure that when you have a study permit or work permit that's, you're nearing the expiry date, that you apply to extend your status. So you make sure that you keep status here in Canada. When you submit an extension application, as long as you've submitted it properly, you'll hold what's called implied or maintained status. So this means that you're able to continue with the provisions of your previous study permit or your previous work permit while you wait for a decision on that extension application. So for example, for those of you right now who are studying and you have a study permit, if your study permit's expiring, you submit your extension application properly prior to the expiry date that's listed on that study permit. Then while you're waiting for a decision to be made by IRCC on that extension application, you'll hold implied status. And so that allows you to continue studying in Canada while IRCC processes your application. But very importantly, you only get implied status if you apply properly. So if you submit an incomplete application or you forget to pay the application processing fees, then it's as if you have not filed your extension application. Really important because that means after the expiry date that's listed on your study permit, you're actually out of status. And once you are out of status, the next step then is to apply for restoration. So this is for someone who's lost status and is now applying to get their status back in Canada. But there is a timeline. So with restoration applications, you have 90 days from the time that you lose, from the date that you lose your status to submit a restoration application. So really important to make sure that you note down the expiry dates of any temporary permits that you have. But if for whatever reason you do miss it, then you want to make sure that at least you submit that restoration application within 90 days. One really important distinction, though, between being on implied status and submitting a restoration application, like I mentioned earlier, when you're on implied status, you can continue studying. You have status while you're waiting for that decision. But after submitting a restoration application, because you are out of status, you can't actually resume studying until you get a decision on that restoration application and your new study permit, for example, is issued. So really important. Ideally, make sure that you have those timelines and those dates noted down so that you do submit your extension application on time and properly.
Another concept that you should be aware of is the difference between high-skilled versus low-skilled occupations. So the Canadian government has created a classification system called the NOC codes, the National Occupation Classification Codes. right now, the system is divided into 5 different categories. O, A, and B, occupations that fall into those categories are considered high skilled, and C or D are considered low skilled. When we talk about permanent residence, you will see that there is a very, very big difference if your work experience is considered high skilled versus if your work experience is considered low skilled. Okay. If it's high skilled, you are able to get permanent residence through most of the different kinds of categories. If it's low skilled, most of these categories will be cut off to you. Okay. So very important to know if what you did before is considered high skilled and what you're going to do as work is considered high skilled or not. Now, we are going to put you guys who registered for this webinar on a list for our newsletter, because what we tell you guys today will likely change tomorrow or the day after or a month later, etc. Because immigration law in Canada changes very, very fast. The only way we can let you guys know of some important immigration law changes that might affect you after the seminar is to provide you with notices, and that's what we put you on the list, okay? If you guys are just watching this and haven't registered for the webinar, you can also get on the list by going to our website at lmlawgroup.com. One of these changes is the new occupation classification code, which is going to be implemented in 2022. And there's going to be a significantly big change for these occupations. So instead of 5 occupation classifications, there's going to be 6 tiers, and it's TEER, okay? And tier 0, 1, 2, and 3 are going to be classified as high skilled, and the other 5 and 6 are classified as low skilled. So certain things that are classified as high skilled in the old system may not be classified as high skilled in the new system. These are some of the examples. However, there are also going to be 16 new occupations that were previously classified as low skilled that are going to be classified as high skilled in the upcoming. So these are some changes that will be coming up. Stay tuned as to how they can affect you as well. Okay.
Now, when we're talking about status in Canada and your study permits, there are some conditions on the study permit that are very obvious, like the expiry date, which we just spoke about. But there are other conditions that are not as obvious. They're implied on you. And one of those is that you must actively pursue your studies. What does that mean? Well, IRCC is looking to make sure that all students that are in Canada on study permits are always making progress towards the completion of their program. Now, once you stop studying, once you stop actively pursuing your studies, regardless of the expiry date that's listed on your study permit, you actually lose your status within 90 days. So that study permit can become invalid 90 days following the end or whenever you stop studying. So let's say you have a study permit, it's valid for another 3 years, but you change your program, you do a program that's now 1 year instead of 3 years, and so you finish studying 2 years earlier than the expiry date that's listed on your study permit. Well, that doesn't mean you have status as a student in Canada for those remaining 2 years. 90 days following the end of when you finished your program, that study permit does become invalid. Now, there are 2 exceptions to this rule. The first is if you're on a scheduled break. IRCC defines scheduled breaks as those breaks that are listed in your school's academic calendar for your program. So it's not a break that you decide to take on your own. If your program, for example, doesn't have a summer break, but you want to take a summer break and you decide to just not enroll in courses, that's not considered a scheduled break, because that's one that's not a part of your program. It has to be a part of the academic calendar for your program at your school. The second exception is if you're on an authorized leave. This is a leave that's been approved by your school, and it can be for a variety of reasons, like health reasons, for example, but it does have to be approved by the school. And we do recommend that you keep a record of the approval, because when you need to apply for another study permit or a work permit, whatever it is, you will need to be able to show that you complied with the conditions of your study permit. Your study permit also allows you to work while you're studying. So you may not need a separate work permit in order to be able to work in Canada while you're studying. Now, this ability is limited to individuals that are full-time students. So as long as you're a full-time student, you have the ability to use your study permit to work in Canada. Now, the limitations on that are, while you are in your program, while you're studying, during the semester, you're able to work up to 20 hours a week, so part-time, and full-time, so there's no maximum, full-time during any regularly scheduled break, and that goes by the same definition that we just talked about. If you're in your final semester of your program and you no longer require a full-time course load in order to be able to finish your program, and so you've registered as a part-time student only in this last semester, then you're able to still use your study permit to work off campus, even though you're a part-time student in that final semester. Now, really important, that ability to work on your study permit is based on you being enrolled as a full-time student. So once you've completed your studies, and once you've completed your studies, you're no longer considered a full-time student. And so what that means is that you do have to stop working. Now, how do we identify when you're no longer a student? Well, as soon as you receive any written confirmation from the school that you've completed your program of study, that's the exact point in time where you are no longer a student and you do have to stop working. This can mean your final grades being released. It can be an email from the school saying you've completed the requirements for your program. It can be a letter from the school, anything that comes to you that indicates that you have now finished your program of study. That means that you do have to also stop working from that study permit. The exception though, because of course there's always exceptions, if you're doing a second program, you can work in between the completion of your first program and the start of your second program, as long as the break between the two programs is less than 150 days and you've already been accepted into that second program. And of course, you still have a valid study permit.
All right. Now let's talk about work permits that you can get after you stop studying. First one, the postgrad work permit. Unfortunately, because Tamwood's is a private college, you wouldn't be able to get it when you just graduate from Tamwood's. If you were to then enroll in a program at a public college or university and do that, like let's say you're studying English now and then later you enroll in the public university or college, you may be able to get a work permit. That's an open work permit when you graduate. The length of time really depends of the work permit depends on the length of the programs that you study in those programs. So if it's a 1-year program, you get a 1-year work permit. If it's a 2-year program, you get a 3-year work permit. If you do a 1-year program and then a 1-year program, you get a 3-year work permit at the end. All of these programs need to be studied at the public college or university.
Another example of a way to get a work permit is working with your employer and having the company do what's called a labor market impact assessment. So this is an employer application where they are supporting you to get a work permit. Now, you do need to have a job offer, like I said, because it is the company that's supporting you in applying for the work permit by getting the LMIA first. The employer has to be offering you the median wage, so prevailing wage, based on the occupation, so the job offer that you have, along with the location of your employment. Now, there's different ways for companies to apply for LMIAs. The default, the regular stream, is where an employer is able to demonstrate they can't find a Canadian or a permanent resident that meets the needs of their particular position. And so that's why they're looking to hire you specifically. For this, they do have to show recruitment for a period of at least 1 month, and then they submit that to Service Canada. The other route, and this is specifically for IT-based companies or IT occupations, this second stream is called the Global Talent Stream. Now, for the Global Talent Stream, companies don't have to do any recruitment, so they don't have to go through that month-long process, but they have to agree to commitments in what's called a labor market benefit plan. It's very versatile. A lot of companies have programs in place anyways. And so where we can, the Global Talent Stream is a much faster and a bit easier of a process for employers to support an application for an LMIA.
Yeah, I mean, in general, most employers in Canada, unless you are doing something very, very specific and very, very specialized, or you're going to a place or doing a job where they just can't find people to go there or to do the job, it's very, very difficult to convince an employer to even move forward with the LMIA and also to get the LMIA approved. So what we want to do is we want to go over some other kinds of work permits that are LMIA exempt. So these work permits that we're going to talk about, you don't have to have an LMIA in order to get the work permits. The first one we want to talk about is called the International Experience Class. This depends on your nationality. I'm going to send this slide out to you guys, and the list is here. There's a lot of European countries on the list, a lot of South American countries on the list, some Asia, I think Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Japan are on there. Australians are on there. So take a look at the list and see if you belong to one of the countries on there. If you don't belong to one of those countries, you could also try to apply through a recognized organization. There's some organizations that are approved by IRCC to apply for work permits under this class. And if you're able to go through a program with them, then you may be able to get a work permit as well under this class, even if you're not nationals of the country on this list. There are age restrictions. Depending on the country, it could either be 30 years old or 35 as the maximum age. And then there are two kinds of work permits normally. One kind is called the working holiday work permit. That's an open work permit. You don't have to have a job offer. You can work anywhere you like. The other kind of work permit is it's called a young professionals work permit. So you do need a job offer, but if you don't need an LMIA, the employer does not have to go and show they can't find a Canadian to do the job. You just need a job offer, and then you can apply for the work permit under this category. Okay. So here's the thing. You can only apply some of these categories. You can only apply for one time only, or it's a two-time deal. So if you can get the work permit, it's very important not to waste your time. You have to get your work experience once you get the work permit. How it works is sometimes there's a lot of people who want these work permits, and there is a limit on how many work permits are issued each year. You put yourself into a pool, and then they're going to have a draw, and they'll just randomly draw people who they will invite to apply. Okay. I looked at some of the pools. It seems like it's not bad right now. It seems like there's still a lot of space for a lot of countries. So take a look at the at this and see if you fall under the international experience class. If you do, it might be worth it to put your name into the pool to try to get a work permit.
Another type of LMIA exempt work permits are those that fall under the free trade agreements. So Canada has agreements with certain countries, and as part of those free trade agreements, there are provisions for professionals to be able to get work permits in Canada. Each free trade agreement is a little different in terms of what the criteria are and what the process is and which occupations will qualify. So it is important to take a look at the specific criteria for the country that you are a citizen of. Some of these countries have, when we talk about the professionals category, some of them do require that your occupation be listed. So when we're talking about the US or Mexico, there's what's called a positive list, which means that only certain occupations can be included in the agreement. Other countries have excluded occupations, so you can get the work permit for any position as long as it's not one of the excluded occupations that's listed there. But what that does mean with these professional work permit through these FTAs is that you do need to first have a job offer in one of the professions that's as set out in the agreement. So before you can start the process, you do have to have an employer. The employer has to work with you in applying for the work permit. The free trade agreements, like I mentioned earlier, each free trade agreement has its own conditions in terms of what's required for experience or for education. It is important to be very clear about the agreement that you're applying through, because some of them are a little bit more onerous than others and have a minimum criteria in terms of how many years of experience you need to have before you're able to apply. Additionally, others differences between the various agreements is what will qualify in terms of whether you need to be self-employed or whether you need to be an employee. So some agreements will allow for contractor relationships, whereas others are only limited to those that are going to be coming in and working as an employee of a company. So another way that we're looking at getting work permits, and again, this is, you have to be a citizen of one of the countries that we have a free trade agreement with in order to be able to go through these programs.
You know, it's very important when you are in the stage when you're still studying to think about your options for getting work permits and programs. And Elisa works with a lot of you guys to get co-op placements, and the co-op placements are important because they could be your foot in the door to getting these job offers, right? So it's important to know what kind of jobs you should be looking for, and you know, whether you could qualify for certain kinds of work permits. Because as you see, when we move on to permanent residence, it's going to be important for you guys. Oftentimes, most of you will need some sort of work experience in Canada or a job offer in order to be able to apply for permanent residence. One last one. I know none of you guys speak French, so I'm just going to quickly go through this. But if you guys know of anyone who can speak fluent French, and it's generally at the CLB 7 level, which is like an IELTS of a 6.0 level, that IELTS is English. It's just, you guys probably know English. This is like a median level, okay? So you'll need to do your TAF or it's a TCF as well. So basically how the francophone work permit works is if you have that French level, you can get, if you get a HighSkilled job offer outside of Quebec, then we can apply for a work permit for you without a job, without a LMIA. There's no requirement to speak French at work. It's that simple. Those lucky French people, French-speaking people. Okay, next. All right, let's talk about permanent residence. I'm going to go through first the express entry system because it is the most well-known system, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll move on to some other categories as well that you could think about qualifying for. So how express entry works in a nutshell is this. First, you have to create an online profile. And you can create an online profile if you qualify under one of three categories: Federal Skilled Worker class, Canadian Experience class, and Federal Skilled Trades class. And then you can, if you're creating an online profile, you'll be into the Express Entry pool. Now, just because you've created a profile and you're in the Express Entry pool does not mean that you have actually applied yet, okay? When you're in the pool, you're just a candidate. You haven't submitted any application yet, okay? When you're in the pool, you will get a series of points, a score based on your background, and also if you have provincial nomination as well. Every 2 weeks or so, the government will have a draw where they invite people to apply based on your score and also sometimes other things such as your the category that you qualify for. Now, if you meet that criteria of the minimum score that the government announces and the category, then you can get an invitation to apply. It's only after you get the invitation to apply that you can actually submit your application and then apply for permanent residence through Express Entry. Okay, so let's first talk about how you might qualify to get into the pool. The first category is the one that most of you will qualify for and may already qualify for right now. And that is the Federal Skilled Worker class. So the work experience required for this is work experience that is, you have to have 1 year of high-skilled full-time, which is at least 30 hours a week, and continuous, no breaks in between during that 1 year of work experience in one occupation. Okay, now this work experience can be obtained anywhere in the world. It does not have to be obtained when you are inside Canada. You can also get this work experience even if you're a full-time student. For example, if you were to, work part-time, 20 hours a week while you're studying, and you work, let's say, you're doing 2-year programs, you work for 2 years, that work experience, you can gain that work experience as well. Now, this is just to qualify. This is not to give you extra points for Express Entry, okay? You could get this work experience as a self-employed person as well. So this is just to get yourself into the pool. After that, we do look at your background, your language skills. You have to have at least the IELTS level for English of 6.0 or CELPIP of 7 for CELPIP. That's the minimum to get into the pool. It's likely not going to be enough to get out of the pool, but it's there. You also have to have certain amount of financial savings. For one person, it's around, I think it's just under 1,400. For more people, it's going to be if you have more company family members, you're going to add a few thousand for that. Okay. So that's one category. A lot of people who qualify under this category have never even come to Canada before. Okay. The second category is very, very different criteria. The work experience required for the Canadian Experience class is 1 year of high-skilled work experience in Canada that you gain when you are not a full-time student. So you need to have this when you are not studying full-time. And you have to have it when you're working legally as well in Canada, okay? You have to be an employee under this category. You cannot be self-employed for this. So that one is the Canadian Experience class. There's another one for the skilled trades. I don't believe you guys are in the construction trade. So this is very specific for people in the construction trades as well, okay? Okay, so let's say you can get into the pool. That is only a small part of the equation. The big factor is what is the point? What is your score that you're going to get? Okay, so what makes up the score? The first factor is age. After you turn 30, your points start going down very, very fast. 5 to 6 points every year. By the time you get to 40s, it's a fast slide down, -10, -11 every time it's your birthday. By the time you get to 45, the good thing is your points don't go down anymore. The bad thing is you get a big fat 0, okay? And compared to someone in their 20s who has 110 points, that could make a big difference. There's not too much you can do about age except apply when you can, while you still have those points for age. Education is important. If you have your bachelor's degree and then another program on top, then there's a big jump on that, okay? Language skills are very, very important. We're looking at, if you don't have work experience in Canada, in order to have any sort of chance to get invited, your language scores, you should have at least a 7 in reading, writing, and speaking, and 8 in listening for your IELTS score, or 9s in CELPIP, okay? Relevant Canadian work experience. Relevant Canadian work experience, that work experience is the same kind of work experience that I talked about for the Canadian experience class. So something where you have gained the work experience when you were not a full-time student in Canada and that you were employed and it's high-skilled, okay? Foreign work experience, if you have high-skilled foreign work experience outside of Canada, we can get some points for that. Depending on how many years you worked. Spouse, if you have a super spouse with, education, like high education, language, and Canadian work experience, then they'll probably add some points to yours. Otherwise, they may take away points. It's not a huge difference. Usually it's a little bit of a difference. Provincial nominee programs. Zia is going to talk about this. Now, the provincial nominee programs are programs where the province gets to select, the Ontario province gets to select who they want to get permanent residence. So what happens is, for Ontario, and Zia will talk about, if you are in the pool, the province may ask you to apply with them. And if you do and you get a provincial nomination, you get 600 points added to your score, which assures that you can get permanent residence as well. If you studied in Canada, and this one is for public universities or colleges, arranged employment. Now, if you have an open work permit, like a postgrad work permit, you don't get points for this. But if you have something like LMIA or one of the work permits we talked about, free trade agreement, work permit, or francophone work permit, or any work permit that is employer specific. So working holiday is not employer specific, but young professionals is an employer specific work permit. You can get 50 points, or if you are an executive manager, you can get 200 points for this. If you have siblings who are Canadians or permanent residents, you'll get a few points as well. And French, those lucky French speakers, you can get that. And trade certification, this is for people in the trades. Okay. So if you look at this, maybe you're happy because you think you'll have really high points. Maybe you're a little bit scared because you may not have all these points. Let's talk about some other ways that you can get permanent residence as well.
So like Elizabeth said, when we look at applying for permanent residence, we look at federal, which is the programs that Elizabeth just talked about, and then we can also look at provincial. So what IRCC has done is basically said to the provinces, okay, you can create programs to help facilitate permanent residence in your own provinces. And so every province is a little different in terms of the programs, the criteria, the process of applying. What we're going to focus on is Ontario's. So in Ontario, there are streams that work with Express Entry and those that are outside of Express Entry. Since we were just talking, since Elizabeth was just going through the Express Entry system, we'll start with the Express Entry streams. Now, for you to be considered through the Express Entry streams, the first step is, of course, to have a profile and be in the express entry pool. So everything that Elizabeth was just talking to you about creating a profile, going into that pool, getting a score, a CRS score, all of that is relevant for these express entry streams. What Ontario does is they take a look, they go into the larger express entry pool, distill it down to a smaller group of people based on who meets Ontario's requirements. And then from there, they issue what are called notifications of interest. So it's basically a letter that gets sent out that says, we're interested in you, come apply to us. It's only after you get a notification of interest that you're able to actually apply to the province. So let's take a look at the different streams that Ontario has for their express entry. The first is the human capital priority stream. This one does require that you have at least a bachelor's degree. Now, with the human capital priority stream, Ontario has looked not only at that you're in the express entry pool, but they've also been doing draws based on occupations that you have work experience in and what your CRS score is in the pool. So different factors that Ontario does put in when they're selecting for the Human Capital Priorities program. The second one, and again, French speaking comes up again here. There's a French-speaking skilled worker stream. So for this program, you do need to be proficient in both French and English. And again, you do need to have a bachelor's degree. The last one is the skilled trade stream. You do have to be in Ontario and hold a valid work permit when you're applying, and you need at least a year of experience in one of the specified trades. So when we're talking about the skilled trade stream, it's not every occupation that's included. There are specific occupations that Ontario has designated for this program, and you do have to have at least a year of experience in Ontario within the past 2 years in one of those listed trades. With these programs, if you do get a notification of interest, you apply, you get approved, you get a nomination certificate, but this also gives you, like Elizabeth spoke about earlier, 600 points in your express entry profile. And so that basically means that you're at the top of the pool and you're getting your invitation within likely the next draw.
So I just wanted to also emphasize, with the skilled trades, you've seen at several places where the government wants to give special opportunities to people in the construction trades. It's because there is a recognized shortage of people in the trades. When you look for jobs, you don't have to have a job that's related to your field of study. If you are interested in doing work as a carpenter or etc., and you have some experience doing that, you may be able to find an employer who is willing to apply for LMIA, and we can get LMIAs for people in the trades because there is a recognized shortage in this area as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, outside of the express entry streams, like I mentioned earlier, there are streams that are non-express entry based. In Ontario, these are the employer-based programs. Now, there are 3 categories here, but let's talk about the process of applying first. So as of last year, Ontario introduced an expression of interest system. So what this means is that the first step is creating a profile in Ontario's pool. So this is completely separate from the express entry system. So when you're going through the employer-based streams, the first thing you're doing is creating a profile in Ontario's pool. Now, when you create a profile, you go into a pool of candidates that's specific to the program that you qualify and that you've selected. From there, you get a score, and based on your score, Ontario does draws and invites the highest scoring individuals to apply to the province. When we're looking at their points-based system, it's different based on the category that you're qualified and that you're applying through, but Ontario considers factors like your job offer, Canadian work experience, education, depending on the program that you're applying through. But what we don't see as being part of their point system is age, which, like Elizabeth talked about, is a huge factor in the express entry system, but is not a factor for Ontario in their employer-based streams. We also don't see any points allocated to if your marital status or if your spouse's background. So it's really just focusing on the primary applicant. Now, with the OMP system, each of their non-express entry streams has a different combination of factors that make up the points system. And so you really do have to focus on which program or programs you qualify through, and then look at the points allocations for that stream. Now, when we're talking about the employer-based streams, specifically in terms of requirements, there's requirements on the company that's supporting you, there's requirements on you as the applicant, and on the position that you hold. Let's talk about the employer requirements. So the company that's supporting you has to be giving you a full-time permanent job offer. Okay, you do have to have a permanent position. So it can't be a contract of a year-long contract, for example. It has to be of an indeterminate length. The requirements for the company do differ a little bit depending on whether the business is located inside or outside of the GTA. If they're within the GTA, they do have to have grossed at least $1 million in the past fiscal year. They have to currently have 5 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees. Now, those two numbers decrease if we're talking about companies that are outside of the GTA. The gross income requirement decreases to $500,000, and they only are required to have 3 full-time employees that are Canadians or permanent residents at the time of your application. Regardless, the company does need to be in business for at least 3 years in order to support your application. Now, with the employer-based streams, there are 3 subsects, 3 streams that fall into these categories. The first is the international student stream. Now, for this program, you do need to have completed at least a 2-year program or a 1-year post-grad program, but it has to be from a public university or college. Okay, so again, if you're, like we've talked about earlier, if you're finishing your program here and going to do another program somewhere else, that second program may be one that qualifies you for the international student stream. The second stream is the skilled worker stream. So this is for individuals who have work experience in the same occupation as the job that you have been offered. So for this program, you do need to have at least 2 years of work experience within the past 5 years. And that 2 years does have to be in the exact occupation as the job that you're being offered. Work experience doesn't have to be in Canada, so it can be work experience that you've completed outside of Canada, as long as it's still within 5 years of when you apply. The final stream is the in-demand skill stream. So here you need to have 9 months of experience in Ontario. And again, we're looking at occupations that are listed as in demand. So Ontario has a specific list of occupations that qualify for this particular stream, and you do have to have at least 9 months of work experience within Ontario in that particular occupation in order to be able to apply through this particular program.
And also just to add to this, the 9 months of work experience could be obtained while you are studying as well. So it just has to be legal. So the in-demand stream is one of the only low-skilled occupation sort of work permanent residence applications out there. And it has a list of occupations. So you should go on that list. Some of the occupations are, for example, nurses' aide, personal support workers, home support workers. You can also have truck driving, certain kinds of construction laborers, manufacturing outside of GTA in the factories, etc. There are occupations which we are very much in need of. That's why they're called in-demand stream. And if you have 9 months of work experience in Ontario for this, and the employers are normally able to show that they can find Canadians to do this job, then we can apply for put you in the pool and see if we can get you invited to apply for permanent residence under this category.
Okay, let's talk about next steps. So really important to have an immigration plan, right? So know what it is that you need to do to meet your goals, right? And this is a great first step, but this is really the tip of the iceberg, right? We're not, you're getting a good sense of what the different programs are and what that process looks like. But it is really important to have a plan that's individualized to you. So to sit down with an immigration lawyer who can go through your background and really set up a plan that meets your goals and works with your backgrounds.
Yeah, because, as you can see, it's all different pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. If you can't figure out, if you don't have it for one piece, you're missing one piece, the whole thing could fall apart. What you study, what you can how you can get a work permit, how to get permanent residence. Once you figured out what these pieces are, then you actually have to do it to put these pieces in place. You may have to study for your English exams, right? Take the practice exams. I don't know how many people come to me and they give me a IELTS results that just does not make sense. And I said, did you study for it? Oh, no. I was really tired. I was, I didn't bother to study for it. I just went for it and there it is. And I didn't even know what was going on. I didn't know how long it would take. But that affects your ability to get a proper result on the IELTS. And as you've seen, some of the biggest factors as to whether or not you qualify for something is your language exam. So make sure you practice for the exams. Make sure you study for it. Make sure you can do your very, very best on these exams. Because these exams don't just measure how well you know the language. These exams measure how well you can do the exam. Okay? Now, the programs that you study, very important. Co-op programs, I think, are great because they help you get your foot in the door. You may or may not need to go to another program after you graduate from Tamwood. All of these things you have to think about. You need to get enough, not just get a work permit, you need to figure out how you can get the work experience while you can get your work permit as well. Okay?
While you're here in Canada, make sure that you stay in status. I mean, we talked about this right from the beginning of today's presentation. It's really important that while you're here in Canada, that you keep your status. It does affect your ability or the options that you have available to you if you lose status or if you're working without authorization. All of these things do affect that long-term goal of getting your permanent residence and later applying for citizenship.
And finally, hopefully your application is not rejected because you've hired a good immigration lawyer who can, advise you properly. But if you decide to do it yourself and if your application is rejected, please do not continue on to do it yourself, okay? There are very, very specific timelines for going to federal court, for example, to ask the court if you feel like it was unreasonable, it was unjust. You want to go to the court, there's very, very specific time. It's 15 days if it's inside Canada to notify the court that you want to have a judicial review of your application. If it's beyond the 15 days and the decision was made inside Canada, then you may be out of luck to go to federal court, okay? Also, some people say, oh, I'm just gonna, you call the call center and the call center, oh, yeah, just to go write a letter to immigration. Okay, the call center, first of all, is not on your side. The call center is representing the government. It represents the government and IRCC. And when they tell you, yeah, sure, you can go and write a letter. If you don't know what exactly to write about, if you don't know exactly what the legal issue is, and the officer dismisses your letter, then that is your one shot to get a reconsideration. If you then come to me and say, Elizabeth, this is what happened, can you go and write another letter? Can you go and ask for another reconsideration? I would tell you that IRCC is not even going to look at my submissions because you only get a one shot at a reconsideration. There are also a lot of other issues. For example, timelines are very, very important. There are so many people who come to my office for consultation after they've been out of status for several months and they've gone beyond the restoration of status time. They've gone beyond, the application, the timeline which they can get maintained status. And so don't wait, contact a lawyer right away. Lawyer, not a consultant. Okay, there's a big difference between a lawyer that goes to law school and is trained and a consultant who does not go to law school and is not trained. Okay, so make sure that if your application is rejected, please don't try to go and do it yourself. Immigration is one of the most serious things that you can do in your lifetime. And they don't mess around. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do is, by the way, this is our contact information. If you want, you can go to our website and sign up to get some news for immigration news. And if you wanted to go and book a consultation to go over your own options, happy to do so. And we will give you guys who've attended the webinar a discount because you've attended webinars. So tell me you've attended the webinar when you want to book. Our fee for the discounted rate is $100. Okay. All right. So if you want to right now, if you have any questions, you can type them into the Q&A button and we will answer questions there. Elisa, do you have any questions yourself that you wanted to ask? Oh, I think you're on mute.
I said, I do have a question, but maybe it's better that I wait until after the students have asked. And then if there's time, I can ask it. And if not, it should be okay.
Okay, great. Okay. Right now we only have one question. So guys, please don't raise your hands. Just type in your question in the Q&A. Okay. Someone has asked, what are young professionals' job? I think this is the category under the international experience class for the young professionals.
Yeah, so with the International Experience Canada program, like Elizabeth was saying, there's two categories. There's the working holiday and young professionals. Young professionals, basically, you do need to have a job offer in order to be able to apply through the category. So basically what that means is that when you're going through the whole young professionals application process, you have to have a company that's supporting your application, and they're basically applying, you're using that position to apply for your work permit through the Young Professionals program. Now, in terms of knock codes, it does have to be a high-skilled position. So like Elizabeth said,
I'm not sure about that. I think it might be, some of them have to be high-skilled. I think some of them are okay if it's not high-skilled. It depends on the—
so depending on the country.
But some of them are okay if it's just pertaining to your education or your studies, or you can show that it's going to enhance your situation.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth, the second question that we have is, can I ask for a work permit while working freelance?
Right. So that's an interesting question. There are certain occupations which are under, like, artists and athletes, etc., where you would be self-employed and you would be contributing to a cultural or the sports life of Canadians, and you're able to perhaps get a work permit based on that, and it's called significant benefit. And also athletes, you can get a certain work permit as well. There are different work permits we have. I mean, there's a whole huge list of work permits we haven't covered in this. For entrepreneurs, there is an entrepreneur work permit as well. You do have to show, though, that you will bring significant benefit to Canada as well. So that's another thing that we can talk about. If it is something that you are interested in being self-employed, there's not a hard and fast answer for that. The question is the answer is a very lawyer answer. It's maybe, depending on the circumstances. Do come and meet with us, and we can give you a very specific answer based on your circumstances. Okay. Lisa, do you have a question?
Yes, it's going kind of all the way back to the beginning. So you guys were talking about implied status and being able to maintain, implied status. So from my understanding, Tamwood students, their study work status is tied into being an active student at Tamwood. And once they graduate from the program, their status, they can no longer work and they can no longer study, but they do have this 3-month grace period, we call it, afterwards. So my question is, if they apply to extend their study work status, this doesn't mean they'll automatically be enrolled into Tamwood. Do they need to be enrolled as students elsewhere to extend their study status, or can they just extend it and then apply for a different school?
So normally, if you want to apply to extend your study permit, you do need to show that you are going to be a student. And so you should be already accepted into a program before, or you're currently, like, let's say your study permit ended early and your program is still going on. You can get a letter saying that your program is still going on, and you can do that.
Okay.
If you were to apply for a work permit, so the act, it's intended for people attending the public colleges and universities to apply for a postgrad work permit, where they allow people who've completed their studies, their study permit is still valid, so it's within the 90 days, and they apply for a work permit. You can start working while waiting for the work permit. It's intended for people to do the postgrad work permit, but if someone graduated from Tamwood and applied for a work permit as well, they could technically work legally while waiting for the work permit as well.
That's great. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I think you've got one more question. Yeah.
Okay. While we are waiting for an answer, that's exactly.
So this just goes back to exactly what you were saying, Elizabeth. So while you're waiting for an answer on an application, can we stay legally in Canada?
Yes. So make sure you apply before your status ends. If you apply after your status ends, then that's another matter. Okay. If you apply before your status ends, then yes, you can stay in Canada. That's what implied status or maintained status is. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for coming. And I think that's about it for all of our questions.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Zia. That was super informative. I know not just for me, but for the students. So thank you guys again so much for arranging this.
It's our pleasure. And we'll have the slides sent out to you guys, and the the link will be sent out as well. And you can also check out our website, lmlawgroup.com, to sign up to the newsletter. Well, thanks so much, Elisa, for hosting us.
Thank you.
And looking forward to talking to you guys soon. Take care, guys.
For sure. Take care, Elizabeth.
Take care.
Bye, Zia. Bye-bye.
Bye.